It's like pretty high pressure in those changeovers because it's like the headliner ends, they have like their big finale, and then you got to start the music like now. Chris Lake would play, and then I'd be on next, or like Rez I went after, and like Sofi Tukker, like just like it would be great, like the biggest names in the industry, and I'd be like, that was great, now it's my turn. And then it's like kind of all bets are off. You can kind of go as hard as you want to go. The first record release I ever had was with Jay Robinson. It went out on Mau5trap, so it's like sick. It was so crazy, and it was like sick, such a cool opportunity.
You know, like you go on YouTube, right, and people say like, oh, there's videos on YouTube that show you stuff, but a lot of people hold a lot of information back because they say, join my program to hear this, right? But it's good to hear this side of it because not a lot of people get to hear. Mm-hmm.
Is it a good call or is it a bad call? And then he was like, oh, actually, like I'm having this breakup, and like I just like I miss her, and I'm just like waiting for her. And so I'm like, okay, boom, like that's the subject matter for the track. The more that I would overwork tracks and like re-record, like it would just strip away like the spark and the joy of it. So it's like you have to really battle with perfectionism. Go to England, it's like boom, here's the bar, like. And then I feel like Caspa and like Scream and Banga came and played that, and this is like 2010, so like the good shit of the UK dubstep movement. So
thank you for inviting me to your place to do the podcast, and I got Sara Sukkha.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, Sara Sukkha. That's great.
Perfect. So like I do with all my guests, where did it all start and how did you get into your music journey?
For me, the music journey has been like my whole life, basically. As soon as I was a kid, my sister was a singer, just loved to sing, grew up singing, did opera school and university. And so I really was in like school bands, school choirs, just all throughout my like young years. And then I ended up going to school in England for a study exchange. And that was sort of my entry point into electronic music. I lived in the South Coast England in Falmouth, technically Penryn actually.
You might have a little bit of a debate there.
Yeah, right? I went to the University College Falmouth, at least I can say that much. And I mean, we'd had like the Stannery was our school bar, and we'd get crazy artists coming in that, like I think the first DJ set I ever saw was High Contrast.
Oh, sick.
So it was like bar, and like I'd been like an Indian folk head all my life, just loved singing, like loved that like soft girl vibe. And then go to England, it's like boom, here's the bar, like. And then I feel like Caspa and like Scream and Banga came and played that, and this is like 2010, so like the good shit of the UK dubstep movement. So that's kind of where like it started. And then I came back to Canada, and I ended up moving to Toronto, and ended up seeing tons of great artists, and got really into like Comtrues and Crystal Castles, that kind of like
Crystal Castles, eh?
Right?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, like that kind of more like there's some live stuff, there's some like throwback synthy and like proper like electronic sort of. That was sort of what got me in a little bit deeper. And then I ended up moving to Vancouver, and I met a bunch of people who were like in the scene, and they were like, yeah, you should come to Shambhala. It's like a really cool festival. I'd never been to a music festival before. And then that was like, okay, it's go time. Like now I'm like an EDM head, and kind of like worked my way through to trap, and then came to like house and techno. So I kind of came in opposite direction, like sonically, than I feel most people take. And yeah, it's kind of like history from there.
Wow. So did you say Indian folk music?
Yeah.
What is that? Like enlighten me.
Like I loved like indie electronic, like Modest Mouse, Death Cab for Cutie, like band based, and kind of like, I don't know, like kind of sad music, like that hitting the feels, and like lots of like instrumentation. And then loved like, I started falling into like trip hop a little bit as well, like getting into like DJ Shadow and like Nightmare on Wax and like those kind of artists. Yeah, like I love like anything that has a live component to it, like an artist, like a singer, or like an instrumentalist. Like it just, when you see them live, it adds so much to like the sound and the performance and everything. So yeah, it was a huge part of my influence there. That's
cool. Yeah. So obviously you've experienced the Vancouver nightlife, the England, UK scene, and Toronto. What stood out to you the most in each city that kind of made you? I know we touched on Screaming Banger and the dubstep scene, but what other acts in them cities really made it like, you know, sort of thing like, I need to get into this scene like massively? Like,
Yeah, I mean, Crystal Castles was a big one for that. It's like a hard one now because there's been like some controversy with like them as a group. So it's like can you separate the art from the artist? So I sort of battle with that now. But that music was so important to me, and I saw them live probably like 4 or 5 times when I lived in Vancouver or in Toronto, sorry. And yeah, just seeing like it was kind of like the dude was like the instrumentalist, and he was like running, the synths and everything, and then Alice was like the singer, and like just sort of seeing that pairing of like, okay, you could be a singer in like a electronic form. Because like I remember going to folk shows like back when I was in grade school, and like I love a folk show when they get up and they sing their songs and then they have some like cute awkward banter and they like talk to the crowd and tell you like the origin story of the song and things like that. Like I'd go to those shows. Like I went to like Joshua Radin like years and years and years ago, and I remember just being like, oh, I wish I could be a folk singer, but I could never really like learn piano or learn guitar. So I thought this dream was just like in the past. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like I could be singing, but like on top of electronic based like melodics or music. And it was kind of like this nice aha moment of like, oh, I can blend these two worlds, and like I don't have to be like an instrumentalist to make it. Like I can use technology to my advantage, or like, yeah, kind of make it in my own way.
That's cool, man. And like with regards to the England scene, in the UK, because I've moved here to Canada to experience like Vancouver scene and a little bit of Calgary, but how is it for you going from in Canada to the UK scene, experiencing that? I know you said like it's a whole new level, but like what kind of genres did you see that were different? Because obviously we got garage, we got drum and bass, we got house, techno, everything. Like, what was your experience for that?
Yeah, well, I mostly was just at that school bar because I was like in the South Coast for like the duration of that time. I really I haven't experienced like the club scene in London or anywhere else. It was sort of just like the school bar or like going around to like all the different clubs and pubs in Falmouth. And so a lot of it was just sort of like DJ based, like someone's playing the music and you're there kind of just partying with your girlfriends. On occasion, there'd be a bigger name and someone like a friend of mine would be like, oh, we got to go to this show. Like this is going to be a good one. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm down. Like most of the time, no idea who's playing, but like really starting to enjoy it and like just be so like immersed into the set. Like if you come from bands and like Indian folk, it's kind of like song end like set. Like this band like plays and finishes and then ends, and there's like a changeover, and it's like this band starts, where it's like the culture of DJing of you're just threading songs together and then you're threading acts together, and like that smooth transition of the night, like it's so seamless. It was such a different way to like experience music. So yeah, it was kind of like a different, I'd say like I really need to go to England to like get the full proper club like nightlife experience, because it was very like like college like party club kind of vibe, but it was like transformational for me, for my life. I'll say that. That's
cool, yeah, because I get a lot of people that watch it from all around the world, and they don't get the opportunity to go to these areas to experience that kind of dance culture and music culture. So it's good to get your perspective on that.
Yeah.
So how did it grow from there then? Like obviously you're a vocalist, and learning the voice and practicing and stuff like that, and listening to dance music. Was you like listening to dance music and thinking I need to adjust my voice to that, or was it kind of like I already know what I'm doing? Because I'm not a vocalist, so I don't know. So I'm going to pick your brains a lot on this one.
Yeah, totally. Well, so I started DJing. So like after I met this like big group of friends from Shambhala, a bunch of them were DJs and producers. So I kind of started to learn the ropes, and that was probably like 2015, the first time I started DJing. And then sort of got into the scene and was just really just purely just DJ based, like putting sets together, other people's music, hadn't dipped into production just yet. And then once I DJ'd for a couple of years, then I was like, okay, I'm ready to start like dabbling into Ableton and like starting to, figure out how to make that software work and how to like pull the sounds that I can hear in my head out. And so then I like was producing beats a little bit for a couple of years. And then kind of slowly, like once that was feeling more comfortable, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to start like getting into the vocals, and started like singing on my own stuff. And then people would just sort of organically like reach out, be like, hey, can you do this vocal? And it's a cool thing. It's like, gigs lead to gigs. And so it's like tracks would lead to tracks, and I'd work on one vocal, and it goes out and then someone's like, oh, I heard you did it with that one. Like, do you want to work on one with me? And it was cool. Like, I didn't really think about like having to change my voice necessarily. It was like how to work out like, my existing style is like, it's a very like kind of folky, like I just love to like really like sing and stretch out those melodics and kind of like sink into it like that folk side. So I started working with like just a producer would hit me up and send me an instrumental. And then sometimes they were more structured of like, okay, I want you to say this is the vision, like do these exact notes. And then other times it'd be like, hey, here's an instrumental, like just like send me something back.
Oh, okay.
So as I've done more and more collabs, because I've probably at this point done like, I don't know, 20 different collabs. And not all of them have like exited the hard drive on my computer yet, but maybe one day.
Like every producer.
Yeah, right? Like you definitely like stack up unfinished projects, but it's like all part of the learning process. And like through that with vocals especially, I started to figure out my writing process because like I would always like keep a journal or like I have like a notes app in my phone of like lyric ideas that come like, you're waiting for the bus and all of a sudden like this little like lit comes into your head and you're like, oh, that would be crazy. And I would always write them down. And so then when I first started doing vocals, then I would, like we'd make a beat like with a homie or whatever. And then I'd go into this, project file and be like, okay, what lyrics like could work? But then I found when I started from lyrics and tried to fit it into the song, it was like clunky, it's like you're trying to like, put like 10 pounds of sand in a 5-pound bag sometimes. Okay. So then once I was like a bit more comfortable with the writing process, I would get an instrumental. And then typically as like a deciding factor of whether or not I want to work on a track, it's like I would play it for the first time. And usually in my head, I'm like, can hear, like imagine sorry.
That's so good, no?
Usually in my head, I can imagine like the melody and how I want to bounce off of like the underlicks and just like work myself into the song like as an instrument, like not thinking of the voice like with having lyrics. It's just like, okay, we're another sound in the mix, like what's the pattern, what's like the flow that fits in. And then I would put words after once I knew like how many syllables and like the pacing. And I found what would happen pretty naturally is I would start hearing the melody, and as I'm like humming it, scatting it out, all of a sudden like a couple of words would just sort of fall out, like you're like running back to you, like it just so it would come out. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, that's like the subject of the song, cool, let's write around that. Like, and I remember I was collabing with this one guy CLB, who I've made a couple of like dope like gnarly drum and bass tracks with. And I remember the first time like we did one song and then we came back to do a second one, and he sends me this instrumental. It's like a gnarly drum and bass track, and instantly I could hear like the melody, and Waiting for Your Call kind of came out as like just a natural pattern. So then I text him and I was like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, like what kind of call should it be? Like, is it a good call or is it a bad call? And then he was like, oh, actually, like I'm having this breakup, and like I just like I miss her, and I'm just like waiting for her. And so I'm like, okay, boom, like that's the subject matter for the track. And then like, I pull in my own experiences and kind of like fill out the lyrics or whatever. But it was like kind of a cool way of letting the music be what it wants to be and not like forcing it into like some like idea that I had. I kind of just like let it like, okay, this is the song you want to be, this is the subject matter you want to talk about. And I like kind of let it like release the reins a bit and like let it be what it wants to be.
Yeah, that's kind of more natural that way, right? And the song's more natural. It's not forced, like you say. It's kind of, you'll feel it a lot more, right?
Yeah.
This is blowing my mind a little bit. I'm going to be completely honest, because like I've done my own vocals in the past, and it's like, and you change it up a lot. But to actually have some sort of like structure, like me, when I do mine, I don't have a structure. I just write a song and then put something on top of it, right? But to actually kind of work both ways, it's kind of like blowing my mind a little bit, because I've never spoke to anyone that does vocals like you do. So
yeah, it's like you can kind of like do it a couple of different ways. But I found like if I try to overwork a track, and then because I'll like record everything myself, and then I'll do my own like vocal production. So I'm going through like I'll take a ton of takes, and then I'll go through and like comp it and find the best, and like you listen to your voice at like a detailed level forever and ever and ever. And doing that process myself really helped me improve my vocal technique, because then I would like listen to a bunch of takes and I'd be like, oh, I'm not like holding those notes long enough, or I need more like vibrato or whatever. Like when you listen back to yourself, that's when you really can like learn. And I found like the more that I would overwork tracks and like re-record, like it would just strip away like the spark and the joy of it. So it's like you have to really battle with perfectionism and just like good enough is good enough, or like, you know, I'd do a take and it would feel good and it would sound good, but then there'd be like a mic that pops in it and I'm like, oh, it's wrecked, like I have to redo it. And like for so long I would redo it, and then like after a while you're like, oh no, like no one's gonna hear that because like it's inside of a track. But like, you know, when it's just you and your headphones and hearing your voice, like you get too like sucked into the minutia of it. So I've really learned to, you know, trust myself, like do it quick and not overthink it and just like keep moving forward. Otherwise, like I've ruined ideas by re-recording them and then I'm like, oh, well, now it's bland and now it's like, now I don't want to work on this project anymore.
To the next one, yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
Lost your chance.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of want to go back to how you learned producing beats and getting into everything. Because I know you said you started off with Ableton, but how did you learn? Did you do any courses? Did you just learn off friends or YouTube? Like, what was your process for that?
A little bit of everything. Like I had like a former partner and he went to production school and so we learned like, you know, doing like live instrumentation, like tracking drums and vocalists and things like that. So he would teach me a lot of the foundational parts of like like the song structure of, you know, getting into like songwriting, and then a bit of the, you know, technical stuff within Ableton. And then I took a couple of sort of like online little courses, like a couple of, you know, be like a couple of weeks long, and you learn a few foundational things. And and then once you start to like learn some terms, you're like, okay, I don't know what sidechain means. And so then I'm like, okay, hit a YouTube video and like figure out how to sidechain stuff. And then that was sort of like what I operated off for the most part, like for the first couple of years that I was producing. And then last winter, I did Cosmic Academy, which was like a artist development and like music production course. And so yeah, that was good. It was like pretty intense, but like a ton of great knowledge. And I really learned like they're more like method based of like how to finish music quickly and like learning like lots of like workflow and technique and like discipline things about that. So I've just kind of been slowly piecing things on as I go. It's like, you know, you can't like drink out of the fire hose right off the bat. So it's like you gotta just sort of slowly phase up. And then like I feel like there's like endless knowledge to learn about production, but yeah, starting to feel like a lot more comfortable in Ableton and not feel so inhibited by the software, because it's like I can hear what I want to do in my head, and then you're just like, how do I translate it out? Like how do I get the synth to sound like just the way it's working in my head? So I'm kind of like getting there. We got a ways to go still, but that's the journey. That's making music is like this endless pursuit of like learning and knowledge, which is pretty exciting. That's
pretty sick. And like the Cosmic Academy, then they showed you how to finish a track, because that's everyone's struggle. So what lessons did you take from that, and how would you finish that track? Like if you was, you know, obviously producing, you're like, can't finish it, what things would you implement to finish it?
They had a lot of instruction about like the workflow of working quick and not overthinking things. So a lot of it would be like, okay, like you finish a session, you listen through it, you make a list of everything that you want to fix. You're like, oh, I need to like find a new snare. I want to like add distortion to my bass and like, you know, do some mix and mastering. And then it's like, okay, let's, you know, you get 10 minutes to find a new snare, clap or whatever, and you set a timer. And then you do that. And then it's like the timer goes off. It's like, okay, next. And either it's like you've crossed it off, you finish it, or it goes to the bottom of the list. It's like, then you move on. Now let's focus on the bass. So you don't get like dragged in overthinking and perfection. Because it's like you could click through 1,000 claps and be like, that's not the right one. And it's like, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like doesn't matter. And like you can always go back and fix it, but also like moving forward with it being good enough, like is good enough, because otherwise they just stay on your hard drive and they never get finished.
Yeah. So that also then goes on to the vocal part then. Obviously you've learned like the production part of it, but how did you learn to, you know, record your vocals, mix them, and then blend that into the track that you've made? Like, I'm just trying to paint a picture, you know, for people that might want to get into vocals for, you know, for music. Yeah,
100%. I mean, yeah, because my former partner, he learned like kind of audio engineering and he taught me a lot about that. Like, so I remember he came home from school one day and he's like, okay, the new project is we have to make a 2-track EP and record a vocalist. So let's make you an EP. I was like, okay, sick. So we like go into the studio and it was cool. Like we got to try out all the mics, because it's like a school with like all the best gear. So I remember we like tried out a bunch of mics, and then I would record like the same thing, and then we'd listen back on and like, okay, this is what the Neumann U87 sounds like. This is what the $10,000 mic sounds like. And then, you know, this one over here. And so then when we go back and do the comp, I could pick out like, oh, my voice sounds the best on like that mic. Like, you know, everyone's voice is going to sound different. So it was cool to kind of have that opportunity to, for one, like sing on a U87 mic, which is like the dream mic, obviously.
Okay. How much does one of those go for?
I think it's like 10 grand.
What? Jesus. What about these mics? Are they good?
I think it's sounding good.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh, like $10,000 mic though, Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was a cool thing to like have the chance to go into like a real vocal booth and have that experience of someone producing you, like being in the booth, and then someone's like, okay, run it again, or like try it this way or try it that way, like to have that bit of coaching, because it's kind of scary to like record your own voice and like listen back and it's raw and you're like, okay, that's what my voice sounds like. So yeah, so that was really helpful. And then it's just like a rinse and repeat thing. And you know, I would like go home and I would record something and I listen back and I'm like, oh, like I messed up these settings and like I have to go back and change it. Like you kind of have to like make those mistakes, and then slowly you learn. You're like, oh, if I like the gain needs to be here, otherwise my plosives get too spicy, or like it. Yeah, I think it's like a repeated exposure, and I mean access to good gear definitely helps, and then you know kind of what to strive for, like what good actually sounds like. Yeah,
I'm really intrigued because like there's other female vocalists, and like do you have to like write your sing a certain way for house music? Like you can't, or can you just sing anyway? Like is there a certain tone, or is it? Do you know what I mean? Like you see a lot of Annabelle England and people like that sing music, and the guy Ali Love as well. He sings on a lot of like nature tracks. So is there a thing like you have to do for that? Yeah,
because I find for me it's really based on the BPM. So I've done a bunch of house tracks where I've done the vocals, but they've been more like spoken word, kind of like sassy little like club tracks where you can kind of just like, you know, like attack, decay, sustain, release. Like it's kind of just like short impact, and it goes with those lyrics were on a track I did with Jay Robinson, and it was like a hard, like rolling techno kind of thing. Okay. But I find for me, like if I'm trying to sing at like a house beat, like in the 120, 130 range, then I feel like I'm rapping. And so it's a bit too fast. Yeah. So then as soon as I started collabing and doing more drum and bass, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can sing. Cause it's like 80, you know, it's like you get the halftime. So then I feel like I could really like fall into that sort of folk feeling again. So what I found, like I like doing these like kind of like sassy spoken word things for house, and then it's really nice to just like dive into like the more melodic side. And I've done a little bit of like trap and bass kind of vocals as well. So it's like, you know, big heavy anthemic bass, and then I get to be like the floating vocal on top, like the ethereal thing like right before the drop. So they're definitely different styles of writing and like styles of execution based on the genre. So I kind of like it all, though. I can't really like pick one thing, which is that's like pretty much my MO. I'm very like, I want to do everything. I'm super multi-genre, so I'll try it all.
That's cool, yeah, because a lot of people just sort of stays in one lane, right, and they just stick to one thing. But doing the drum and bass thing's pretty cool, and using your voice differently on that, and then for house music is pretty good. So how do you train your voice for these songs? Like if you're training for the house, like, you know, is there certain things you have to do? And then for the drum and bass as well, or any other genre, how do you train your voice ready to do the vocals?
Yeah, I've had a couple different vocal coaches over the years, because like I grew up doing like choir, so you learn a lot of like, you know, your foundational like vocal training through that. And then when I started producing, that's like, so probably around like 2018 timeframe, that's when I was like getting a little bit more serious about it. So then I got a vocal coach, and we worked together for like a year, and we'd go through and just like work on expanding my range and working on increasing your breath control. Mm-hmm. So I have like a lot of warm-ups where it's like, you know, inhale 15 seconds, hold 15 seconds, exhale 15 seconds, like ways to really train your instrument and like just start to, just expand your lungs, and just sort of like you build that muscle. And then, you know, doing lots of scales, and just really like I'm always trying to expand my range up. Like I'm kind of an alto, so trying to keep like working on like building up and building power in those like high notes too. So I don't have a vocal coach right now, so that's like next on my list for the fall is like find someone. I really want to find someone that's a bit more like jazz focused and do some sort of like really like kind of old school like vocal foundations. And like I like come from a big jazz background from my family, so I like I just love a jazz beat.
Jazz is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, yeah, I like jazz. And it also goes on to me like, because you know, you see these things when people go, oh, when you warm up your voice, it's like me. I don't know. So this is why I'm asking the questions, because I'm a bit blown of how this all works. So with collaborations, then obviously you've done like a lot of collaborations. We mentioned like Majestic, and you've done stuff for DEFECTED as well. Like, how did this all come about, and how did it all come in, into life?
Yeah, it's like such a beautiful thing when I think about it. So I first got connected with Jay Robinson. He was like the first person I ever like really collabed with. And it happened because like I've loved Jay for years. Like his music, his bio is like your favorite DJ's favorite producer. And like that could not be more true.
That's cool.
And so I've like loved him for years. And then I, as I was like getting, building up as a DJ a bit more, I would, make Spotify playlists and be like, okay, these are my like fresh picks of the week, as you like in the DJ grind. And so I would like add songs to these playlists, and then I would tag the artists on Instagram and be like, hey, like new music from @DJ Robinson. And so I just like organically loved him and wanted to support him and threw it in. And he replied and he was like, oh, like, thanks so much. And like, let me know if you want to do vocals sometime. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yep, say less, like, here's my email. Yep. And then that was it. We started he'd send me ideas. Like Jay was like, he's such a great guy to collaborate and produce with, because he has so much vision. Like he'll email me and be like, say exactly this in this tone, like he can hear it, and then I just execute it. And all of our songs have like done really well because of that, because he like knows what we're looking for. Sometimes, someone doesn't always know how to draw it out of you. So he comes with like really clear vision. And I think we've made like 4 or 5 songs now. Like, wow. Yeah, we had a couple. We've had one go out on at the Axtone label, and then Tomorrowland Records, and then Mau5trap. So we've made some heaters together. And then because Jay is good friends with Majestic, and Jay would just hit me up and be like, hey, can you say these words? And I would just like record them and email them back. And then sometimes, just like life carries on. And then one day he emails me and he's like, oh yeah, I was helping my buddy produce a track, and we ended up using this sample that like you'd done for me. So here it is. It's a song, and it's like Dance All Night, feat Sara Sukkha, collabing with Majestic. I was like, oh, like out of nowhere, like, so you never know. It's so cool. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as just like planting money trees. Like you make a song, you collab, like it might not see the light of day right away. And then it's like, a year down the road, it's like, oh, this turned into a song, and it like turned into like one of my bigger songs. Like it's very like organic the way it's sort of progressed. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. And then it's like, you put out a song and someone hears it and they're like, oh, I saw you on this song. Like, do you want to do a track together? And it just sort of spreads from that. So it's all been very organic in the way I've like met different producers to work with. And yeah, it's been awesome. Like they're all like really good friends now. And I'm like finding the people that are easy to work with and have the same taste and same palette as you. Then it's really easy to, align on the vision and like execute it and finish it.
That's mad. Because I was looking on Spotify and there's like, 250,000 listens on one song, and I'm like, freaking hell, like. And then I was going through like your mixes as well, like you've done Badlands, which we'll get onto, and I was like, freaking, I've done like a song with Majestic, and I was like, wow, that's what an achievement. Like, thank you. Yeah, that's mad. And what's the process then of like, obviously you get the vocals done and that, but like the contract kind of stuff, like how does that work with being a vocalist? Because obviously when you write a track, people get it from Splice, a sample, then it's royalty free thing that you can use. But how does it work for a vocalist, when you are collaborating?
Yeah, so I mean, you have your different sort of splits of who owns what parts of the song. So like some songs I'll have like producer credits on if I did more of the writing, or sometimes I'll just have kind of like performer credits. So it kind of depends on how, like what kind of split went into it. But I find like most of the artists I've collabed with, like everyone's just like, 50-50, like, or, it's like, they're always happy to give you a cut of it. Cause it's like the vocal like makes the song in a lot of cases. Everyone I've worked with has been just so gracious of like, we did this together. Like, let's just split it together. I mean, for being a vocalist on a featured song, a lot of times like the contracting and all the hard work is done by the time it hits my inbox. Like, cause I'll get an instrumental, I write the vocal, send it back, a couple months pass, and then it gets signed, and then they'd be like, okay, we signed it. So a lot of cases I haven't had to do like the negotiating and the contracting phase. Usually I'm just sort of like volleyed in with whoever the main producer is. But yeah, I learned a lot about that in Cosmic Academy actually as well. We had one of our instructors like was a lawyer and then like switched and like is a dope EDM DJ now. And so he had a whole class on like, okay, this is how you read contracts. This is like, you always hear about those really like predatory, like she was stuck in a 10-year contract. Like we learned about the differences between like, okay, contract deals where like they expect like X number of albums out of you, or like just one-off signings, and kind of, terminology and things to look out for. That's like, that seems sketchy, or like I need to kind of like look out for it. And I also had a really good resource, this great mentor, like he's a friend of mine in LA. He's been like a, label exec for like 25 years. And so he was like such a great mentor to me. I would get a record like contract in my email, and I would send it to him and be like, hey, like, what do you think? And he had a really good approach where he would read it through, and then he replied once and was like, okay, in paragraph 4, what are the 2 questions that you think you should ask? And so I'm like, oh, damn. Because I read it and then I'm like, okay, I should ask about this and I should ask about that. And he's like, yeah, exactly. So it was kind of like teach a man to fish, which was like, it's such a simple thing, but he could have just been like, oh, you should ask that and that. But like turning it on to give me like the opportunity to have critical thinking, to be like, what don't I understand? Or like, how long is the term, like in perpetuity? Like, what does that word mean? Like, yeah. So it's still a bit overwhelming, like doing the contracts, because they feel so like intense and scary. And I've even had like in conversations with this mentor, he's like, oh, I maybe wouldn't, agree to that line. He's like, but also like, I know that lawyer who's on the deal and it's not going to be negotiable. So it's kind of like, sometimes the offer is just sort of the offer, and it's either like take it or leave it, depending. Like I think with the bigger labels especially, it's kind of like, this is it, you're signing it or you're not signing it. I can't come back and be like, no, I want this. Like, okay. Yeah. But I've never had any bad experiences at all with it. I'm kind of like learning as I'm going, and yeah, you like get the hang of what to look for, and, the differences between owning the master and owning the publishing. It's like, it's like, yeah, like if you own the publishing, then it's like however many plays it gets, and then you get cuts the royalties. But then if you own the master, then if it goes into like sync deals, like if it's going to be like in a commercial or a video game, then the people who own the master, because then like sign off on being like, yeah, we want to have this, like we want to put this song in Rocket League or like whatever it is.
Okay, this is very interesting, and it's good knowledge for people that don't know this stuff, because some people feel like they have to pay for calls to understand this, but a lot of people, they, like you go on YouTube, right, and people say like, oh, there's videos on YouTube that show you stuff, but a lot of people hold a lot of information back because they say, join my program to hear this, right? But it's good to hear this side of it, because not a lot of people get to hear what all this is all about, right? True.
Yeah, and it can be like overwhelming, like, because it's like you don't know what you don't know. So until you have someone kind of guide you along, and like I really got to shout out like Jay Robinson's, like, their management team, like Circle 8 and Mickey, like they really helped me so much, because like the first record release I ever had was with Jay Robinson. It went out on Mau5trap. So it's like sick. It was so crazy, and it was like such a cool opportunity. And like Mickey would email me and he'd be like, yeah, we're gonna put you on as a primary artist just to like, make sure this like goes really well for you. Because with being a vocalist, like sometimes you're featured, but it doesn't, like if you're not a primary artist in like the back end designation, then it doesn't show up on your Spotify. It doesn't show up in your monthly listeners, which like monthly listeners is like one of the main forms of currency in our like digital world. Like, because followers can, they're not as active. Like you could have a lot of followers, but they might not be with you in the day-to-day. So like the monthly listener count, like that's like, those are your actual fans. And so I've had some records go out where I'm just sort of the featured artist, and so my name kind of shows up on the listing, but it doesn't reflect back on my profile. So there's like differences in that kind of thing. So like, and through having that experience now, when I go into collabs, I'm like, okay, I need to be a primary artist. I want 50-50 on like publishing and master and whatever. And yeah, so like Jay's team, they were awesome of like, we want to make sure this is great for you, so we're going to make sure that you're a primary. And like, and it turned into like such a special release, and like just like you would never even know to ask about that kind of thing, like until it happens. And it's like, there's probably a lot that I still have to figure out, but you kind of like piece it together, like every contract, day, right? Yeah, 100%.
And that's good to hear that it's like that, right? Because you, like you said earlier, you hear all these horror stories of like, 10-year deal, you can't do nothing with this and that. So it's nice to hear that there is like still some good sort of D going on out there with it, all right. So that kind of goes on to my next thing then, like breaking into the DJ scene now. You've done Badlands, you've warmed up for John Summit, you've done some huge things. So kudos to you, mate. It's wicked.
Thank you.
So like, how did that all sort of start of getting your first set, you know, reaching out and your process of getting involved?
Yeah. So yeah, like 2015, I start DJing. I get a set of decks and start making mixes. And then one of the clubs in Vancouver called MIA, it's like, rest in peace, MIA. It's gone now. But they were kind of in a transitional period, or they were just kind of opening, and then they were like wanting to transition what kind of sound that they were bringing in so that they can attract a different crowd. So they had been a little bit like deeper, darker, you know, deep tech and techno, and they wanted to start attracting a bit of like younger clientele. So they wanted to move a bit more into like deep house, tech house, and just like just a fresher sound. So they ended up throwing like an all-female DJ battle, and it was like a mix submission. So yeah, I had like 10 people tag me being like, Sarah. So then I made a mix, and then I applied, and then they chose like 5 of us. So it was like it was so old school. It was like Sivs and Alex May and Minxie and me, and then this other girl. And like when I reflect back, I'm like, Minxie's crushing it, Sivs is crushing it, Alex May is crushing it. Like, it's so crazy. Like, we were all so young. This was like 2016. Yeah. And then that was like the first time I ever like played in a club. And Alex May won the battle because she was dope. And so she won like the opening slot for Talkie Monsta. But then like the organizer, Maggie, she came up to me after and she was like, hey, like, do you want to be a resident at the club? And I was like, yep, say less.
That's sick. Residencies are the one, aren't they?
Yeah. So it was like a bit of like, you know, being prepared for the moment, and then like it being the right time for the moment kind of thing. And, you know, being a female, like at this time, you know, 2016, I mean, we still battle with a bit of, you know, it's a bit of a boys club, but it's definitely, we're doing better now. Yeah, but at that time, a lot of clubs were like really making a conscious effort to like, okay, we need more female names on this. So it kind of just was like, yeah, it was good timing. And then like once you're in, I was like within the Blueprint community, and like Blueprint really treated me well. They still treat me so well. They have like really, like, I have a lot of my career to give kudos to Blueprint because of all the opportunities they gave me. And so I had like kind of a residency at Deep Down Inside on like Saturday nights, like not quite playing every week, but pretty close. And then they'd book me at celebrities. And what's cool about like the way they did it in Vancouver is like you'd be the opener, and then there'd be direct support and the headliner, and then the opener would close. So like I was in that open close slot for like years. And so it was like you learn to open the room, and which is like such a skill, because when it's like 10 o'clock and there's nobody there and everyone's awkward and no one's drunk yet, it's like, how do you like curate a set that's like going to make people feel comfortable enough to like get off the wall and start to like fill the floor and stuff, and like read the room, and like all like great foundational knowledge. And then like Chris Lake would play, and then I'd be on next, or like Rez I went after, and like Sofi Tukker, like just like it would be great, like the biggest names in the industry, and I'd be like, that was great, now it's my turn. And then it's like kind of all bets are off. You can kind of go as hard as you want to go, because you know it's like you really got to play your slot. There's like the very unwritten rule of like you got to play your slot time. So when you're direct support, you know, you can't go too hard, you can't like, you got to give them somewhere to go. So you really got to like, you got to play. It's like a respect thing. But then when you're closing, it's like, I don't know, everyone's done. Like they've played. So like I remember in Vancouver, I played, like I closed after Mala, and it was I played like the hardest like techno, and like, oh my God, it was like wild, because it was just like, yeah, like the headliner's done. It's like
keep the people in there, right?
So like learning to like drop in after like the biggest names, like I really like that, really learned my chops that way of just, you know, reacting on the fly and being ready with my catalog to like, okay, I don't know where they're going to leave me. How do I match it and go? So that was like huge in those early days of DJing. That really taught me my skills that I have now. Yeah,
because the warm-up set for me is like one of my favorites, because you can go through music and you haven't played for a while. You can sort of build it up, and you play the more groovy, deep kind of stuff. And I kind of like that. And you've played for some big names. That's fucking incredible. Like Chris Lake, you didn't tell me that one before. That's Rez and Millar and
Chris Lorenzo.
Chris Lorenzo as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So many great ones. Like, so many great names would come through Vancouver all the time. So you'd hit like the bigger international acts, and then coming to Calgary, we still have like huge names. So I've been like so grateful to play the Badlands Festival. So I played the last 3 years, and I've done 4 slots. So yeah, it's like closing, and because I've played all the closing slots for those ones, which is Like talk about intimidating because it's
Yeah.
like 7,000 people, stages, and like just the biggest production ever. And like I remember the first year I closed Millennium and I closed the Chainsmokers. And like, oh man, going after the Chainsmokers was probably like the most intimidating thing
crazy.
ever. Dude's like jumping off the booth. There's like fireworks going off, and I'm like, okay, I'm next. I'm next. I'm like, good job, boys. That was cute. Now it's my turn. Like, yeah, pretty crazy.
Oh man, that's crazy. Like, see, I'm kind of baffled because I didn't know this about you that much. Obviously, I read into every guest I have, and I kind of listen. Like, you know, I was looking into Spotify. Like, 8,000 Saint listeners monthly, and then like Chris Lorenzo and the Chainsmokers. So, how many people was it you played after? What's the biggest crowd you've played against? And for sorry, like that's Badlands, right?
Badlands, yeah, definitely. Like, last year I played after Deadmau5, and then this year I played after John Summit. So both of those nights I think were sold out. So I think the venue is something like 7,000 people. I mean, like, you know, once the headliners end, like people definitely, you know, start to trail off. But I had really great sets. Like I definitely was able to keep them and keep them entertained, and keep them all the way to the end, which was great.
How is it meeting these people for you? Like, to have Deadmau5 and, you know,
Yeah, a lot of them, I mean, those like Badlands especially, like there's no changeover between us whatsoever. So like I haven't met any of them. Like Deadmau5 gave me like a thumbs up while I was like waiting in the wing, but it's like pretty high pressure in those changeovers because it's like the headliner ends, they have like their big finale, and then you got to start the music like now. Otherwise the crowd, like the more that there's downtime, the crowd's like, oh, okay, it's midnight, I guess I'll go to bed. You know, like it's like pressure to get up there, like get my USB loaded in, like up, go, fader on. So there's like, everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're going to meet John Summit. I'm like, not a chance. Like barely saw him for like 2 seconds while we're like crossing each other's path. So yeah, hope to one day, you know, get to hang out with John Summit and Deadmau5, but not yet.
I'm kind of blown away by this. I'm not going to lie. And how is it for the first time playing in front of 7,000 people? I haven't played in front of that many people.
Yes. I find like the first 15 minutes are like pretty scary because you're just kind of getting your bounds, and then after a while it's like the muscle memory just kicks in because it's like now I'm in my like 8th year of DJing, maybe 9th year. So it's now I'm like, okay, I've played like probably 300 shows at this point. So, you know, it's like the nerves are there for those first couple of mixes, and then you're like, oh right, like I know what I'm doing, and then you can kind of relax and you get used to like the visual picture in front of you, like just seeing like so many people. And what's crazy about those big sort of setups is you're actually like so far away from the people that it isn't as scary as you think it is, because you almost like can't really see them as much. Like, you know, when you play, like I used to play like the back room at MIA all the time, and you're like, the decks are on a table, you're standing there, the crowd's standing there, like you're not like on a booth, you're not elevated at all. So it's like you're mixing, you look up, and like Buddy is like got his nose over top of the mixer, like
taking pictures of your
so it's like those gigs are almost scarier because you feel like way more vulnerable, because it's like you can see all of my facial expressions. Like if I mess up and I'm like, ooh, like 5 people just saw me do that, whereas like, you know, when the crowd is so much further away, it's like almost like a safety blanket a little bit of like the stage and the barricade. So it's like it's weird because you have a different kind of connection, because it's like, you know, the energy is so big in those big rooms, but you don't really see like the faces of the individual. So it's crazy. Yeah, it's like some of those like intimate gigs are almost like they're almost more nerve-wracking because you feel way more exposed.
So do you prefer the smaller sort of venue, or do you prefer the big style? Like kind of stuff?
I mean, they're all so different. I think you need them all, because like the big events are like awesome. You get great content. Like it's so exhilarating. Like the high of that energy, like coming off stage, like it'll take me like several hours before I can go to bed, because I'm just like, that was crazy. But then like, you know, and those sets, I'll put like 20 hours of prep into those sets to play like a 2-hour show. Yeah. Because it's like such high stakes. But then like the smaller gigs, like they're not quite as like high profile, and so then you have the flexibility to like push your boundaries a little more, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna try a couple new genres, and like you can kind of experiment a little bit more and have that like live pressure, you know, mixing time, because like you can mix at home and like try new stuff, but until you've got like a live crowd going, it doesn't quite feel the same. So it's like you sort of need both to like kind of grow your skills and then like really let them shine. So I have like different ways of prepping sets based on what kind of show it is. Like those big gigs, like I'll tend to put them like every single track in order, and I've like mixed it through. I've practiced my transitions, like it's really rehearsed, and I have a very specific thing I'm trying to do. Whereas the like smaller like local gigs, I'll often just make a couple of like, I'll make these like buckets of vibes, and it'll be like groovin', bumpin', hectic or whatever, and then just kind of put things in the folders and then just, you know, vibe it out and kind of freestyle a bit more, because like that is such a skill, like to be able to react on the fly. And, you know, like you start playing and you're like, oh, this is a bit too like underground for this scene. I need to like pivot out. Like that's such an important skill, but like you're not testing that skill out when you're closing Badlands. Like, no, it's like we got the plan, we're executing the plan goes good. So I don't know. I don't think I could pick. Like I think they're both needed. They're
both needed in their own cool way. Kind of thing, yeah. So if when you did play Badlands, was there ever a point where you had to change up and it didn't go to plan?
Actually, yeah. This year at Badlands, because I had done all my tracks in order, and I knew I wanted to end on like doing live vocals for the first time. So I, you know, had to, you know, hit, you know, these tracks. I've only have so many vocal tracks, and they had to be at the end. So I kept like watching my clock during my set, 'cause I played a 2-hour set. So it's like, it's a fair bit of time. And then, I was kind of monitoring it. And at one point I was like, oh no, I think I'm mixing too quick. Like I get nervous and I end up like mixing really fast. And so I was like, oh shoot, I'm going through my tracks a bit quicker than I planned.
That's how I normally do it, yeah.
So then I had to kind of like midway through, I was playing like a bit of bass house. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go now into like this folder. I prepped a couple like for like that show or whatever, and go shopping, and just kind of in the moment like punched it up with a couple more tracks that were like in the same vein, and then I could kind of come back to my original plan. So that in the moment you're kind of like trying to keep your composure, just kind of keep like emanating and being a performer. But in my head I'm like, okay, like I gotta play like those 2 tracks, I gotta end up in like a 2A so I can transition to like that song here in this key. Like there's like so much going on kind of on the inside, but hopefully it like doesn't translate when you're in the moment. You're like, oh fuck.
Yeah, wow. It's good to hear this sort of stuff, because I've never played that sort of size venue, and when you're going after someone like that, like, you know, big name like that, it's kind of like, it is me just hearing your story is making me like a bit like nervous. I'm like, fuck, I feel nervous for you. But you know, it's amazing. I mean, this is the whole point of this podcast, is to live through your experience, and it's a fucking crazy experience. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's crazy when you like reflect back on it. And I remember actually, like I had a buddy come to Badlands last year when I closed Deadmau5, and he's a friend I met in England, and so like he was there. Like he was the one feeding me tracks to be like, oh, you should listen to that, and like, do you know who Dizzy Rascal is?
Oh, Dizzy Rascal, yes.
And so like
my childhood,
right? So like he was like this buddy George of mine, like from North London. Like he was really instrumental in like, you know, teaching me the ways of like the UK scene, and like I hadn't DJ'd yet. So then he comes like 10 years later to come visit me, and then he watches me like in this set, and it's like, afterwards he was like, that was so insane, and he kept being like, Sarah, do you realize like how crazy that was? Because like after a while it's like those gigs, like you almost normalize to it because you start doing it, and it's like, you know, it's a big gig, but it's not like you're kind of like, okay, yeah, like I've been preparing for that, but him going from like 0 to like 1,000, he was like, that was actually insane, Sarah. Like it was so cool to have that kind of fresh perspective, to be like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, that was like the biggest gig of my career. Like, you're right. Let's take a hot second, and I'm going to go home and journal about it.
That's crazy. And what kind of lessons have you learned from when you started to where you're at now? Like, if you look back and reflect on things, like what things did you, like I say, did you learn and thought, I need to change a bit here, change a bit there? Not, I wouldn't say necessarily bad experiences, but just, learning curves. Yeah,
learning curves for sure. Well, I like the process of setting up my record box was like an ongoing kind of refining that system. Now it feels like a really dialed system that just like it's like a wheel that turns, but it took a bit to get to that place. Like I'm like a very organized person, and I find like that having a record box that you can navigate like at the drop of a dime, that really has turned me into such a strong DJ, because it's like, okay, I know when I opened for Nora En Pure that it was like these vibes, and
Nora En Pure, are you kidding me? Another name drop, Jesus Christ.
And so then like then I'm playing a show like, you know, 6 months later, a year later, and I'm playing it and I'm like, oh, like they're not vibing to it. I'm like, I need something else. Or actually, like there's this one story, I did dip into my Nora on Pure playlist because I was at a music festival. It was like a bush rave, and a DJ had kind of like dropped out. They didn't make it. So then these two dudes like filled the slot, and it was like 2 p.m. We're laying in this like enormous hammock for like 30 people hammock. And then these two dudes are playing like bass house, and it was like screechy bass house. And all of us on the hammock were like, no, like this is not the right music. So like I jumped off and I like went up and I was like, hey, like can we like B2B? Like can we like go a little bit of like day vibes? And so like that was the playlist I went into, because I'm like, this is what we need. Like the sun is shining, we're in a hammock, it's a music festival, we're in like the outer country of like Nanaimo and Victoria. Like I'm like, we need deep house. And so like having that robust organized system that I'm like, I need exactly this sound, I know what folder to find it in, boom, 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 done. Like that ability to like quickly navigate your collection when you have to pivot, because like being able to pivot is like, I think the most important skill a DJ needs to have, because like you can have like your set all planned out and then you get there and they hate it. It's like you have to just swallow your ego and be like, I know I had a plan. That plan is not a good plan anymore. We need a new plan. And I mean, not every DJ is like that. Some people are like, this is the plan. If you don't like it, you can leave. Yeah. I don't like that. I like to make sure everyone is having a good time. And, you know, like if you enjoy it, that means like I'm doing a good job. And then I'm enjoying it. So then you enjoy it more because I'm enjoying it. It's like we're a team, like one team, one dream kind of thing. Like that was one of the biggest things to get that system like organized. And like I tag my music a lot. So like when I pull up a track, I can quickly like, you know, I tap like hot QC, and that's like the drop. That's like the main drop. So then when I'm like queuing up to play, I can just like put it in my headphones, cue, boom, hit C. I'm like, okay, I can hear the meat of the song. I know it's going to be like the right fit or not. Or I'm like, no, another one. Versus like, you know, like I'll see some people and they'll like scan or like get the jog wheel going, like fast forwarding. And I'm like, bruh, you're wasting time.
That's me.
You're wasting time. No, you got to take your tracks.
That's old school me. Like, yeah, I'm definitely that person. Like, I don't have anything organized. I just have the years. So I've got music from the 90s onwards to thousands of tracks over the time. And I'll just select a year. I'm like, oh, I'll do this year. And you know.
Yeah. And like everyone has different ways. Like I developed that system because I was playing a lot when I was like, especially first in Vancouver, I had a residency there for about like 4 or 5 years and would play like almost every Saturday. And so you're always playing, so you always need new music. And so a lot of times like I'm getting my promos, I'm downloading them. I might have heard them like once or twice through, or like maybe not even entirely through. I'd kind of click through it and then I'm like, okay, that's going to work. Throw it in the folder. And then you go. So a lot of times it's like, I don't even know, like based on the title, I'm like, I don't know what song this is. Yeah. And then like being able to have this system, I'm like, okay, well, it's in Tech House Groovy, so it should work. And then it's like, I kind of pre-make this system so that it's like foolproof on the day of the show. And then I don't have to worry about like, you know, dropping the vibe too much or like having inconsistencies. Cause I'm like, past Sara has done the work. So like, if it's in this folder, like it's going to match. Like, I don't necessarily need to know what song is playing. And then like the drop will hit and I'll be like, oh yeah, it's this song. Right. I remember. Like we're like discovering at the same time. I'm like, sick track. I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, I put it on. Wait.
So do you get people sending you a lot of music then?
Yeah, I've actually like made a bunch of friends that way. Like this guy Keaton in Vancouver, like a Ratman and Bobbin.
Ratman and Bobbin, yeah, I've met those guys.
So I think this one's Bobbin. I never know which one's which.
One's got loads of tattoos and one hasn't. That's the only way I can remember
not the
guys,
tattoo dude, not Colton. Right. So Keaton's like mad producer, and he had seen me play at like MIA, and like one time he just like emailed me and he was like, yo, like here's some tracks I've been working on. And then I like just started playing them in my sets, and then we like became friends, and we that was it. Like I'm like vetted, you're dope. And so and then I played his, like I still play his songs, like so I've like made friends that way, which is cool. And like I have a promos thing. I do get some music that way, but yeah, it's kind of like I love like the organic ways that people like meet and find each other through that.
That's cool. And I like the way that you mentioned kind of you have to suck in your ego a little bit to you know, keep the people on dance floor, because I think a lot of the time people, they jump into on the decks and like boom 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 boom, and at the end of the day you're there as a job. You know, back in, you know, when I was playing, and well, you know, even now to this day, you're kind of there to keep the punters, you know, the customers in, right? To keep drinking and keep them going, right? And I think a lot of people, that kind of gets misplaced now a little bit as well, right? And you see a lot of DJs on a revolving door kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I found like, from playing a lot of shows, like I would learn the pacing of, especially those open gigs. Like one of my main mentors in Vancouver, Ali Dad, he would we would play, like I remember I had a B2B, it was like me and Sivs and Ali, and we played a Gorgamish, and we played like
great place
all night. Like it was like a all night B2B, and like I put a track on, like Sivs would build it up, and then Ali would bring it down. And then I kept being like, oh man, like Ali. And he's like, you gotta feed the bar. Like you gotta send them to the bar. You gotta let them have a smoke break. Like you gotta you can't just tire them out by like banger, 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 banger. Because like it gets tired. You kind of lose impact. So you need that contrast of like, it builds up again. And yeah, it's like you kind of like, he would purposely like kind of almost kill the floor a little bit. And it's like, that's when people are like, oh, okay, I don't want to let this track. Like, bar, should we get a drink? And then that's like how you fuel the business. And it's like just little things like that you'd never really think about. But like Ali's been DJing for like 20 years or more. And so you're like, you know the rhythm, you know the flow. And so like, learning, like that was a big one of you can't tire people out. Like, you know, if you just like run them too hard, then they're like, oh, I'm going to go to bed now. So it's like, that pacing of like, and just like, it's a good way to be in control of the dance floor of like, you know, you build it up and then, you know, you're like, oh, you thought I was going to drop it there, but actually like, psych, I'm going to take you over here. And like, and then we're going to build it up. So it's all about like crowd control as well.
Is there any other sort of big people you've played for that you haven't name dropped yet? Because you surprised me with all these people you're just dropping names. I'm like, wait, what? And who else have you played, like supported you?
Well, since being in Calgary, I supported Eli Brown in like the fall. So that was crazy. It was like a Hunter was on the bill too. So it was like really like dark tech night, which was awesome. And then who else? I mean, there's a bunch that are coming up. Like I'm going to be supporting Duskus on October 3rd at Commonwealth. So that'll be sick. And then Sydney Blue coming up later too. So I really got to like give a shout out to Blueprint because they've really like put me on strong and just given so many opportunities. Like it's crazy. Yeah. When you think back and you're like, oh yeah, like I played that show. Like that's wild. Like that was my hero. I like Chris Lorenzo was like one of the bigger ones where I was like, this guy is my idol. And like, it was so awesome to like be direct support for him. So then he saw me play and then like we became friends after because he like was impressed by my set and like, so it's like, it's kind of crazy when you like think back. Cause you know, you always like keep going forward. It's like, there's always another milestone to hit. So it's like, I find it's easy to get in that track of like, you know, you have a big win or you have a big, you know, gig. And then it's kind of like, okay, next, like what's like the next big move. And so it's like really I try to like actively practice coming back and being like, oh, like, okay, that actually was crazy. Like reflecting like, okay, 5 years ago me would like be losing her shit right now that I just met, you know, Sofi Tukker or whatever. I remember I closed after Sofi Tukker. I played for them a couple of times. Like they kept coming and they kept booking me with them. And then one time I like was doing my close and I like transitioned my first track in and I remember like Tucker like popping the info, like checking the CDJ out to be like, ooh, what track is this? I was like, okay, that's like the biggest compliment ever.
Yeah, no doubt.
When the DJ's like, track ID.
Yeah. That's crazy. Did you ever have like any equipment like foul on you? Because I know you said like, you know, when you're doing a DJ set and you're reading the crowd, you kind of have to adjust to that and be good at, you know, being responsive on that. Have you had any sort of equipment foul on you where you're like, oh shit, what do I do?
Oh yeah. I feel like that's like the mark. You're like a real DJ when you've like had to save an emergency loop live or like, I remember like I played the snow bombing festival that happened in like the Kamloops, like Sun Peaks Resort.
Okay, yeah.
So I was like, I don't know. It ran like 3 years. I don't know. My lanyards are on the wall there. I could find the years.
Yeah, but quite a few there,
yeah, it was like a snowboarding music festival. It was like the Canada version of like snow bombing. And I was on one of the like outdoor stages and it was kind of snowing, kind of raining. And I was right before like the secret guest, which ended up being, he has an alter ego called Hilo, but what's his like main project?
No, God,
shoot,
it's my brains in now.
He's such a big name too, but the name is escaping me.
Yeah, you're picking my brains here with this one.
Yeah. But so like this bigger name artist is like coming on after me and I'm like DJing and like there's like rain coming into like the power bar. And so like this guy's management comes up and to like the organizers and they're like, okay, he's not going on like on this stage. You need to they need to build a bigger stage for him. So then I'm like in the middle of DJing and they start like building like a gazebo around me and like covering the decks with like tarps and then like, you know, they're picking up the decks and putting them on like a riser, and then like one of the decks drops and like I have to like restart the music. So there's definitely like been moments of ambiguity. Like that one was one of the tougher ones, but like I've had like, you know, emergency loops will happen, or you know, things like I've had, you know, effects chains don't work. And like I do a lot of effects when I'm DJing. And so you get there and it's like, that tool doesn't work. Okay, that's part of my creative process is just gone. You're like, okay, we're going to just adapt. But I remember I played this one Bush Rave, and I was playing like the 5:30 or like 5 a.m. slot. And I was playing like deep house, progressive, like sunrise kind of vibe. And then like something happened with my USB. It must have like corrupt or something. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. But like I bring a song on because I know that what title it's going to be. I start mixing it in and I can hear in my headphones. I'm like, oh, this is not the song that I think it is. And something in my like the back end of my USB, like track names were like linked to different audio. So all of a sudden I'm like putting on this like drum and bass banger. And I like realize it, and it's like, it's too late to like, I'm like, I just have to let this play. So I've been like playing this like smooth deep house set, and all of a sudden it's like hammer drop, and everyone's like, whoa, like, did she mean to do that? It kind of like woke up the crowd. And then I kind of just had to like train wreck out of it back into like a house track. It was like, I remember putting it on. I'm like looking around. I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, you just have to go for it. You just have to make it work. I'm like, oh shit.
Just wing it, yeah.
And like it was crazy. Like I looked in my folder after, and like there was like res songs in my like deep house smooth folder, and I'm like, what's going on? So luckily I've never had anything like that happen, but I definitely like got new USBs after that. They couldn't be trusted. That was the end.
That's wild. Wow, that's crazy. So it kind of goes into my next question, and like obviously talking about your future, like what future plans have you got for, you know, your music and your vocals and stuff like that? Like, and you've obviously DJed some massive things now. So is there any more big things coming up?
Yeah, well, like this year I started singing live for the first time. So that was like a really big goal. Like I'd been working towards this like since I started producing basically. And like New Year's, I like closed my set with like singing an original. And then pretty much like every set since then I've been, you know, just trying to just work that muscle and just get used to it, because you work out different kinks. Yep. So like doing more live stuff is really like in the future path that I want to be continuing down, and starting to like, I'd love to work with more like live looping and like do a little bit more live production stuff, because I have the push. And so it'd be so cool to like, yeah, like be DJing and then kind of, you know, bring in the channel that's like the push, and be doing a bit of like, yeah, like live looping or kind of like live ad lib shit on my original tracks, and then kind of DJ back into like regular tracks. So
that's cool.
Trying to figure out like this hybrid. I can kind of picture it in my head of like the kind of live show I want to have, of just this, yeah, sort of a hybrid between a DJ set and a live set. But there's like starting to do vocals live has been such a like a good challenge, but it's definitely a different set of challenges, because all of a sudden now you're in like performance mode. So I'm like, okay, I gotta like do vocal training. I gotta like make sure I don't lose my voice, and you know, make sure that I have the right, you know, in-ear audio equipment. I can hear myself, I can tune myself. And yeah, it's like a different set of like things to think about. So, and especially I'll be DJing and then I'll put on a song and then sing it live. So I'm kind of like being both roles of being my DJ and being also the performer. So I'm kind of working out like the best way to do it. So
that's cool.
That's that. Yeah. More of that for sure. And just like, yeah, getting more production. Cause now that I've like started singing my own tracks, now I'm like, okay, well now I need more tracks. Cause it's like, you know, you play your music and like with tracks even that don't have vocals, like after a while you're like, man, I'm like so sick of this song. I've been playing this song forever. So then I'm like, okay, I need like more stuff, more weapons to throw in the mix and just like have more catalog. So that's kind of the goal for this year. Like I just moved into like this new place. So now I have like a proper studio for.
Yeah, it's sick, mate. It really does,
thanks. Yeah, it's nice like having a designated space for the studio now versus like it was, you know, it was like on a table in my middle of my living room. So it's like, it's nice just to be able to leave everything out and just kind of like give it the space and like the mental thing too of like going to the studio, I think really helps. Like, you know, it's like you got to designate the space for like what activity you want to happen in there. So having like a really intentional like studio, I feel like I can feel the creativity brewing, and I'm excited to kind of take a break from DJing for a little bit. From like the summer was really crazy, but it's like I've started a habit where now like towards the fall and winter, like I kind of disappear a little bit more, and yeah, just like get into the studio and just like take a break and kind of like replenish the batteries and things like that.
Cool. I do remember seeing a video. Did you sing at the Badlands on one of your songs?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Yeah, it was crazy. I ended up singing like 5 originals, I think.
That's wild.
So yeah, it was crazy because like I'd sung a couple of gigs leading up to that. And so I'd kind of got it worked out. Like I was getting more used to my in-ears. But then I roll up to Badlands and I go to my sound check, and then they give me like the mic pack and the wireless mic. And I'm like, got my in-ears in. I'm like hooking up my mic pack. I was like, I feel like a pop star. Like, this is crazy. It's such a small thing, but like being wireless, I was like, I feel like Lady Gaga right now.
Carries cable around with you.
Yeah. And because of that, then like, I was like able to, get up on the booth and like stand up on the booth and sing. Cause that was one of my goals for like, after the first year I played Badlands. Cause I'm like, okay, I gotta like stand up on the booth. Like, that'll be like the first goal. So like, yeah, I remember, I think it was like my Millennium set that I closed. Then I, got up on the booth for dropping my original and kind of like danced on the booth and whatever. So then this was like the next step of like, okay, now I'm like gonna get on the booth and sing. So it was pretty crazy. Like it was, and it was like so well received. I had just like so many people at the end that were just like so like open to like letting me be an artist, and just they were so supportive and like stayed all the way to the end, and just was like, it was such a safe space to like really push my comfort zone. So yeah, it was kind of crazy.
That's when you most thrive though, isn't it? When you step out your comfort zone. And it must have been mad to be like, should I get on the stage? Should I get on there? And you're like, fuck it, get up there.
You gotta like hype yourself up, and then I'm like trying to find a foothold, and then like like for one of the songs I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and I'm like trying to find a step, and then I like kind of just barely get up there, and then like have to start my verse, and but like made it through, and like it went without a hitch. So
you're the first person I've ever like interviewed that's kind of done it this way, like that's wild. Like I couldn't get up there and be like, I say a story quite a lot, but there was a time when I was like 17, 16, I was doing everyone's like parties when I was younger, and one of the parents come up to me and was like, can you let someone know that someone's lost their car keys? And I'm shitting it, and I'm like, I pick up the mic, I'm like, anyone lost their car keys? Like a UK garage kind of thing, like, go to the bar, like that, right? Kind of thing. And I put it down, like, sort of just swell up, like, just suck into this hole of, like, just self, like, ugh. And all the parents look at me just drinking, like,
what did you say?
What did you say? Like, and I'm shitting it. And so I can't imagine playing something like doing one of your own tracks, but that must be real fulfilling though to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it took like years of like working up to it, because I was like afraid of going on the mic forever, and I'm like, this is so silly. I'm a vocalist that's like, I'm like afraid of going on the mic, and I would never do it for like years and years. I would never like introduce myself. I would never like I just like kind of let the music speak for itself. So I had to first like I remember I was like headlining a show in Victoria. It was like my first headline show ever. And I go to this show, and I had like made sure to go for a sound check so I could figure out like how to turn the mic on and everything. And I was like, I'm going to talk on the mic. And so like I do my set, and then I was like, hey, I'm Sara Sukkha. Like, thanks for being here, whatever. And so like, that's the baby step, like, which is so like, it's so innocuous. But then it's like, okay, you've done that. You're like, it's okay. It's not so scary. And then you can like go on the mic a couple times and like hype up a track, or be like, this is an unreleased, and then it sort of like the novelty just wears off a bit, and then you're like, okay, this isn't like, it's just normal. Like for me, it was like I had this like totally irrational anxiety around like wanting to go on the mic, but then going to talk and like nothing comes out because I don't know how to turn the mic on, and like that fear like stopped me from going on the mic for years. It was so silly. Like it was just like this irrational fear of like I go to do something and I'm like. and then it actually happened like at a show. Like I played Chasing Summer this year actually, and I was like about to like I was playing Dance All Night on Defected, and I was like, I go on to mic to be like show me your hands if you know this one, but then the mic didn't work, and then I was like, oh okay, and I just like put the mic down and just like kept mixing, and I realized after, and I was like, oh, that was it. Like that's what I was afraid of for years, that like stopped me from,
and it just carried on.
And I was like, it was so not a big deal. It didn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. And so it's like you just have to kind of like slowly keep like breaking those it's like those tiny like 1% better, like tiny goal crush, and then it just accumulates, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, and actually it's not as it doesn't seem crazy to like get on the mic and sing the songs I wrote because I'd done all this legwork of like laying the groundwork to get me there. And actually I feel like feels easier to get up there and sing your own music versus like if you were like, go up and do karaoke because it's like, that song, you wrote it, like I don't have to worry about like remembering the words because like I wrote them, like they just are there, So I found like as soon as I started like singing my own stuff, I'm like, oh no, like I know this song, like I feel comfortable, like I know it,
Yeah, I get you. Did you ever suffer from anything like imposter syndrome?
Oh, constantly.
Yeah, because a lot of people ask me, like, oh, do you suffer from it? And I think that's one of the major things that holds us back. Like,
100%.
Right? So, was there any way you got like, what sort of things did you do to get around that?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a couple of books on it. Actually, I read a book called like Imposter Syndrome in Women or something like to do with that effect, and it had all these great case studies of like people who feel that, especially women in like positions of power, and it had all these like stories of like CEOs and this and that, and like I think like once you realize that like everyone has it, like I feel like even Billie Eilish played Coachella and afterwards was like, I just feel like I'm pretending to be Billie Eilish, like hearing that like Billie Eilish is having imposter syndrome.
Kind of makes
and
it
I'm
easy
like,
fit, doesn't it?
You're just like, oh man, like that's just like the way the human brain works. Like once you just have to realize that like not everyone is like judging you as much as you're judging yourself. Like no one is noticing the tiny little mistakes. Like they're just not the whole world's not focused on you. Like it's like that spotlight effect, so like spotlight syndrome. And once you can kind of like have third party like a vantage point on that, and you're just like, oh, like. No, like I'm worried about this because like I'm me 100% of the time, but like people don't care. Like it just doesn't matter. And and I mean, like repeated exposure helps. Like the more you do it, the more you like prove to yourself you can do it. So it's like after a while you're like, oh yeah, no, like I've done this before. I've done it. I can do it again. But I mean, like reading a lot of books on like there's so many resources. So yeah, this one about like imposter syndrome in women, and then another one is called The Mountain Is You. And it's like, it's really good. It's like, it's all about like understanding that like you are in your own way.
Yeah. And it's all in your own head kind of thing. Right?
Yeah. It's like fear of like, fear of failure or like perfectionism. Like those are all like part and parcel to it. So then it's like the more that you can catch yourself in that behavior, and then you're like, oh wait, no, I don't need to be like, I don't need to be like focusing on it, but it's an ongoing thing. I still like, I struggle with it all the time. I don't think that ever goes away, but like you're like once you're like, oh, everyone feels that way, so we probably all shouldn't feel that way because it's all good.
It's good resources like the books that you mentioned as well. And like just before we finish up as well, what advice would you give for people that are looking to become vocalists in the EDM scene and getting into DJing, producing, but as well like I've never had to mention the vocal part. So what advice would you give for people like that?
I mean, like learning to be your own vocal producer will really help you. Like if you can be self-sufficient, like if you don't need to like find a producer and find a studio and like have someone edit it for you and have someone like EQ and clean it up. Like if you can do that yourself, then you can like expedite the process. So it's like I can just be in my home setup, like I record it, I like comp it, clean it up, I've got like a little mastering chain, I like run it through Melodyne and do like tuning that way. And then I can like send it off myself. I think like, and that's like one of the big things we learned with like, in Cosmic and all these different school programs. It's like you just have to like learn to work quickly so that then you can work in volume, because then it's like doing it over and over. That's how you'll improve. But I'd say like that's one of my like secret powers as to how I've been able to do this is because I'm able to be my own DJ, be my own producer, be my own vocalist. So like it's more to like learn and take on it. There's a bit of a learning curve, but to be like self-sufficient can help so much, because then you're not waiting on someone all the time. Like you can just kind of get it done. And I found like that process of being my own vocal producer and like listening to every single take and finding the best one and then tuning it, like that process helped me hear the flaws in my own vocals. And I in the early days I'd be comping my vocals and I'd be like, they sound so stiff, they sound so like delivered. And it's like then it's like, how do I like get more like vibe and swing and like tone and like, once you kind of like deep analyze yourself, then you're like, okay, I sound like really like blah or stiff or like, it's like, so you just have to like, you hear it a bunch of times and then you can go like start to try more. So
oh, that's good advice, because you know, like for me, over the years, I've been in my own head about it, and someone said to me, the best way, like, to when you're producing music is to not kind of give a fuck.
Yeah.
And then you get the best sort of thing. Like, I thought that was really good advice. Like, if I make a thing, I don't overthink. I'm just like, that's fucking good enough. Most of the time, it sounds pretty much, you know.
Yeah, you got to learn to, like, kill your darlings. Like, you can't, like, get too attached to what you're making. And then you just have to, like, I find, like, you just have to let it be what it wants to be. Like, if you try and, like, force it too much or control it or, like, get too, like, perfectionist, then, like, you just wreck it. So, and it's, like, it's okay. Like, there's a balance between, like, needing to finish music, but also, like, knowing when to quit. Like, a friend of mine would always be like, are we polishing turds? Are we polishing turds? Like, at a certain point, like, you have to, like, just know when it's, like, the effort, it's, like, hitting diminishing returns. But then on the other side, it's like, if you never finish music, you never learn to finish music and get better at it. So it's, like, a real balance of, like, I find, like, once I have less attachment to what I'm doing, it's easier to kind of, like, move through the steps and, like, finish it. And even just, like, finishing stuff that you know you're not going to put out, but just, like, to get to that end point of, like, it's done. And, like, it doesn't matter if it just sits on my computer, at least it's not unfinished. Yeah.
I've struggled with it for years. And I've been producing for like 13 years, and I'm only starting to really realize now. I released tracks back in the day, and then I went through a phase of, like, hating everything I did. I even I couldn't touch, like, any instrument or any DAW for, like, 4 years because I hated it, because I overthought it too much, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to enjoy it and not really think about it as I have to do this at this time. It's kind of like just letting it flow.
Yeah, I really go in and out with that of, like, there's some times where, like, I'm like, I don't want to make music. Like, it's, you know, it's art at the end of the day. So it's like when you're forcing it and, like, putting so much pressure on it, like, it doesn't go so well. And I know, like, I read this really amazing book called Big Magic. It's, like, the same author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And, like, she wrote it after Eat, Pray, Love came out. And it's, like, this idea of, like, she didn't quit her day job, like, right when she started writing. Like, she kept her day jobs and would just write, and it allowed her art to be art, and it, like, removed the pressure. It was, like, only until she, you know, put out Eat, Pray, Love, and it's, like, the #1 book ever. Then finally she quit her other job and was like, okay, I'm just a writer. But, like, by not putting that pressure on it, then, like, you can just, like, let it be. So it's like, it's like, I don't have to, like, take every single gig, or, like, I don't have to take on projects that I don't want to do. Like, I had a guy want to collab with me, and he sent me some songs, and then I didn't really, like, connect with them. Like, it wasn't the right sonics. It just didn't really inspire anything. I couldn't hear, like, a melody in my head of what I would do. So I was like, oh no, like, I'm good. Like, thanks for reaching out. And he replied and was like, oh, like, can I like pay you to do the vocal? I don't have to feature you or anything. And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to do it. So, and I don't need, like, I have, you know, I have a day job. I, like, work in tech and stuff. So then I don't have to, like, sell my soul in order to, like, make ends meet. I can be like, no, like, that's not the gig I want to play, or, like, it's not the right, you know, partnership collab. So, like, I'm going to pass. And then, you just, like, remove the pressure. Like, I'm not like, I have to make a #1 hit, otherwise I can't pay rent. It's kind of like, you can be like, whatever comes out comes out. And because it's art, like, and it's like, again, it's like that balance. Like, you have to be disciplined to, like, do it. Like, I think it's like Pablo Picasso has this quote of, like, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. So it's a little bit of, like, through the process of working, you'll become inspired. Like, you can't just sit around and wait to be inspired to go to the studio. You kind of have to, like, get into it and, like, fumble it through and, like, work it out. But there'll be stretches of time where, like, I don't open my Ableton for, like, 6 months. I'm just like, no, I don't feel like creating. And I put energy into different areas, because it's like, it is tough. Like, it is, you know, it's not easy to learn to make music, and then to, like, learn to you know, have creative ideas and original ideas. It's a bit of, you know, you really got to put the work in, especially to get out of those, like, beginner phases of learning music production. And so you have to kind of enjoy doing it. And so if you're just like, oh, I have to do this, like, you're not going to, like, flow and have fun. So I don't know. It's a real balance. Like, I tend to, like, think about my music in phases. Like, I'll be like, okay, I'm in DJ mode right now, and I'll, like, book a ton of shows for the summer and just, like, really dive into, like, being a curator. I'm, like, listening to other people's music and, like, going through promos and, like, you know, going on, like, Beatport top charts or, like, whatever. And then, like, that influences me as a DJ and makes me, like, you know, nurtures that skill. But then when I want to produce and I'm writing, especially, I don't listen to music at all. Like, I don't want to be influenced and be, like, subliminally, like, oh, I heard that lick on the radio and then I think it's an original idea, but it's not. It's just like an earworm from them. So I kind of like, I have to treat them very different. And like, yeah, I'll go when I'm like in kind of deep writing mode, like I'll only listen to podcasts because I just like don't want to like consume anyone else's ideas so that I can like really find the clarity to hear what I'm trying to do. And I mean, like being a DJ and being a producer, there's such different roles and there's such different like personality types. Like you have to be like an extrovert to be a DJ. You're like the life of the party. You're like playing what's new, what's fresh. Like, but then the producer, you have to be like an introvert sitting at your computer, like sitting in the DAW, like clicking through kick samples and like working it out. And like there's such different roles and it's hard to kind of be both at the same time. So I find when I play zones, it's like easier for me to just focus and not feel so like spread thin and overwhelmed, especially because I'm doing like, I'm DJing, I'm producing, and I'm a vocalist and I'm like trying to make content, whatever. It's like, it's a lot of ground to cover. And so it's like, I feel like I'm more effective when I have like less targets and I can really like put my like a concentrated effort into it rather than feeling really like ping pongy and just butter spread around too much bread kind of thing.
Yeah, I've felt that in the past, but now I've just learned just to take each day as it comes and just do.
Yeah,
I've got time for that. I've got time for that. If I haven't, you haven't got to try and stick to a schedule because it can be overwhelming. Even doing this podcast, it's trying to do that and still carry on trying to produce music and family life and work. It is, isn't it? So it's good to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to like share before we like finish up?
No, I mean, like, yeah, I got a couple more gigs coming up in Calgary, like I said before, like Duskus on October 3rd at Commonwealth, and then Sydney Blue November 22nd at Sub Rosa, and then yeah, you might not see too much of me you'll see me out partying because we got some like great acts coming through Calgary, so you'll definitely see me in the dance floor. But that's kind of what's next for me. And I mean, I guess like a parting word of advice to people out there, if you're like trying to be a DJ, is you gotta remain a fan. And that's like something I've learned. And like when I take these breaks from like gigging, it's like, okay, now I can like have more space to go out to shows and like seek inspiration from artists that are like better than you. And like I'm always trying to like, yeah, get in rooms with people that are like more successful than you so that you can like learn and watch. And like it's easy to get jaded from like the grind of being in the music industry. And so like always remembering to be a fan and like remember why you're even like here in the first place. Like it helps helps kind of like rejuvenate you. So I'm excited for the winter to like be inspired and then like translate that into some new music, and hopefully in the spring you see me singing some new songs.
Sweet. No. Anyway, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you for inviting me over to do the podcast, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is great.
Sick, mate. Nice one. Thanks again. Cheers.